I think Good morning, everyone. I think we're ready to start. So welcome to the Faculty of Political Science at Geopolitical University, and welcome to the public forum on understanding the Lancashire-Mekong cooperation framework and China's role in the Mekong region. We have a packed schedule. First, I'd like to invite, my name is Carl Coulton. I'm a lecturer in the Faculty of Political Science. First, we'd like to invite Dean Ek Tang Sopakana, the Dean of the Faculty of Political Science, to some opening remarks.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Faculty of Political Science and the Center for Social Development Study of Geopolitical University, I'm really pleased to offer some brief welcome remarks to the public forum on understanding the Lancashire-Mekong cooperation framework and China's role in Mekong region. I would like to warmly welcome all presenters, moderators, and participants to the Faculty of Political Science today. as well as those who may be watching online. We are honored that so many participants have been able to join us today. The Faculty of Political Science is very pleased to co-host this important public forum. I would like to thank colleagues from China Dialogue, the Third Pole, the Earth Journalism Network, and the Center for Social Development Studies of this faculty for this hard work in organizing this event today. The countries of mainland Southeast Asia are facing a period of rapid change, shaped in part by a significant shift in their relationship with China. New pathways of regional integration and intergovernmental cooperation have emerged, including through the Belt and Road Initiative and the Lanchan Mekong Cooperation Framework. Associated with these shifts have been deepening between China and mainland Southeast Asia and growing things. With economic growth has continued, long-standing challenge on environmental sustainability, social equity, and public participation remain largely unresolved. This public forum brings together experts and journalism from China and mainland Southeast Asia to the geopolitical implication of Chinese investment and regional initiatives in mainland Southeast Asia. It will address the Belt and Road Initiative, the challenges of opportunities and transboundary water governance under the Lanchan Mekong Cooperation Framework, and range of other emerging cooperation issues. It will also address the trends, challenges, and successes for the media on reporting on China's role in the Mekong region. I believe we come together today with a shared concern for inclusive, sustainable, and fair development along the Lanchan Mekong River and more broadly within and between mainland Southeast Asia and China. The Faculty of Political Science, Chulalongkorn University, is very honored to co-host this important public forum, and I would like to wish you a successful and engaging day. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Nino. So we'll move to the first panel. On the first panel, the theme is the Belt and Road Initiative, Geopolitical Implications for Asia. As outlined by Dean Eyre, these multilateral initiatives are catalyzed by China hold important implications for the relationship between China and mainland Southeast Asia and for the people that live within it. This is not only because of the direct trade and investment between China and mainland Southeast Asia, but also because of the geopolitical interests of other influential countries with an interest in the region, such as the US, Japan, Australia, and Korea. So the design for this session, we hope for a very interactive session. Speakers have been asked to speak for around 12 minutes, and that will leave plenty of opportunity then for both debate between the panelists and also questions and answers and comments from the floor as well. Could I also invite Amanda to the panel? So I'll introduce each panelist as they speak. We have 4 panelists in total. The first panelist I would like to speak is Dr. Titinan Ponsupira, who is an Associate Professor of International Political Economy here in the Faculty of Political Science at Chulalongkorn University, where he is also the Director of the Institute of Security and International Studies. Dr. Titinan is an expert on a range of topics, ranging from Thailand's domestic politics to the political economy and foreign affairs in ASEAN, as well as broader international affairs. Dr. Titinan is very well known for his writing both academically in books and articles, and also the author of over 800 opinion pieces in news outlets ranging from the Bangkok Post to the Straits Times, the South China Morning Post, and the Financial Times. So please welcome Dr. Titinan to provide his input.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. It's a very timely topic and seminar workshop on this particular issue. Of course, we're very interested around here on the Mekong region, mainland Southeast Asia. On the 27th of September, later this month, we also intend to do an ICES public forum on water conflicts. Two primary conflict areas in the maritime domains. One, of course, is South China Sea, the other one is the Mekong region. So we'll do that in the morning of the 27th of September. Today, Carl has organized a very good panel, good lineup of issues for the day. In the next 12 minutes or so that I'm assigned, allotted, I'll just say a few things. I have 3 points. I mean, it's not a long time to say too much. First, if you look at the geopolitics, geoeconomics, geostrategic dimensions of the Belt Road issues we called until last year, 2 years ago, One Belt, One Road. BRI is a function of a broader, larger enterprise. BRI is an effort, it's a campaign, it's a development plan. But the backdrop of the BRI is the geostrategic backdrop of the BRI is what I've written about this, that is China's version of Manifest Destiny. China's version of Manifest Destiny. So if you're familiar with Manifest Destiny, this is a U.S. Rationalized U.S. westward expansion at the expense of the Native Americans. The Americans basically, the U.S. are in the East Coast. They took over continental America, including Alaska and parts of Mexico in the 19th century. So when the U.S. was doing this, under 1820s onwards, they had to kind of rationalize. They had to say, well, we're doing it because it's kind of like our destiny to be great. So for China, Belt was a function of recurrent, resurgent greatness. Recurrent, resurgent greatness. Unlike the U.S., China was once great. The U.S. was only great one time. It's still great. It thinks it's still great. But it was not great before. But China, 1,000 years ago, was great. So the greatness of China is the backdrop, the geostrategic backdrop of the Belt Road, BRI. And China has not said it. I've said it, but China has not said this is their manifest destiny. But I think it is China's version of a kind of a manifest destiny, because China, I mean, from what I can see, there's a sense of certainly there's a strategy. There's and we will hear about the financing plans, the Belt Road, which, by the way, is a little bit counterintuitive. So the road is in the sea, the belt is on the land. So the Belt Road, 21st century maritime Silk Road, and the sea going all the way from South China Sea to the coast of Africa, and the economic belt is on the land. Is the ancient Eurasian landmass. If you look at the rise of the BRI, which was global initially, it was in 2013. So it was 1 year after Xi Jinping came to power. Xi Jinping came to power with greatness to handle. I mean, by that time, China was emerging as a great power, full-fledged, full-blooded, and it also faced excess capacity at home. It also has to find its way abroad, outside. And China 1,000 years ago was a great empire. So I don't know, I haven't been able to do the research to see how this came about. Who the kind of the inner circle, inner sanctum of the brain trust of Xi Jinping that came up with this idea that let's do this initiative. But certainly it's calculated to handle, to cope with the excess capacity at home, to maintain China's growth trajectory, also to carve out a geostrategic space for itself in the world. Now, the Belt Road, so that's my first point, it's kind of the manifest destiny. There's a sense of entitlement to it. There's a sense that China is going to return to greatness, and there's no stopping it. China used to be great. It only has been the last 2 centuries that China has been subjugated, that China has been at a disadvantage, taken over by the imperial powers of Europe and so on. But before that, China was front and center in the region. So now we're seeing a grand enterprise, geostrategic enterprise, to return to that greatness which China feels entitled to. Now, my second point is that this BRI, of course, is the value that they have put on the BRI is trillions. I mean, $48 trillion, and it's a lot of money. And we don't know how it's going to be financed. Certainly, China has a financing arm that goes with it, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is still very small. It's not going to be able to finance the whole Belt Road. So the Belt Road financing remains to be determined. But the demand for it, the infrastructural demand for it, in maritime domains and also overland, is immense. So not just Asia that needs infrastructure financing, but also Europe. And if you look at the Belt Road map, you can see that the belt goes, it's the ancient Silk Road, so it goes through Central Asia. It will eventually stop in Amsterdam and Venice. These great capitals of Europe, just like in the 1,000 years ago. And then the maritime, the Silk Road, that goes all the way to east coast of Africa, and of course there was a 7th century expedition by Admiral Zhang He, who went all the way to Africa, and so it's very much kind of harks back to that era. The financing is unknown. We don't know yet how it's going to be financed. Massive amount of money. I think Belt Road BRI is still early days. There is some pushback against Belt Road. Pushback against Belt Road, we'll hear about the debt traps, but the pushback meaning that Chinese investment, Chinese footprints and overtures in various countries all the way to the heart of Africa, not just the coast of Africa, but the heart of Africa. The Chinese are facing some resistance, some resentment, some opposition. And you can see this, all over the world now, I would say. But the major pushback in terms of geostrategic pushback is the free and open Indo-Pacific. So the Indo-Pacific, led by the U.S., of course, initially proposed by Japan, also peddled by Australia, a little bit more reluctantly, joined by India. So these 4 countries, Quads, U.S., Australia, Japan, India, they're trying to give some legs and some traction now to the FOIP, the Free and Open Indo-Pacific. And I see the Indo-Pacific as the geostrategic pushback against China's grand strategy of returning to its own past destiny. And you can see the map, the Indo-Pacific map. Indo-Pacific is still not complete, but it's very much kind of a, not containment per se, but maybe a kind of encirclement of China. So we will see this in the next decade unfold, how the Indo-Pacific is going to interact with the BRI, AIIB, and China's manifest destiny. We also will see in the comparative economies involved in the BRI more pushback, opposition. Around here, let's say, Sihanoukville, Cambodia is not directly on the BRI map, but there's a resentment. Vanuatu, Sri Lanka, parts of Africa, Pakistan, Vietnam, where Chinese footprints have been making inroads. There's been more and more pushback. So we will see this also manifesting. My third point is, well, what does this mean for us and for Mekong space, mainland Southeast Asia? Sometimes I call this space the Mekong mainland. The Mekong mainland is mainland Southeast Asia around the Mekong region. And of course, the Mekong region is a cluster of countries, but we have to understand ASEAN and Southeast Asia as two distinct phenomena. One is a region, one is an organization. But for both, China is very large. So China has, in my view, over the last decade, kind of taken over the South China Sea. And you can see this with the artificial islands, the weaponization of the artificial islands in the South China Sea, and we have a separate seminar on the South China Sea, what China has done. I mean, the Philippines to China to the international, the tribunals, part of the ICJ and international law, really, part of the international law of the sea. And the Philippines won the case. In July 2016. Nevertheless, China is not playing by those rules. In the meantime, China is trying to come up with its own rules in the South China Sea, together with ASEAN. They now have one draft, one document, set of rules that are still being negotiated, called a Code of Conduct. Now they have a single draft, and that remains to be determined and negotiated. In the Mekong mainland, there's of course the MRC, Mekong River Commission, which I think now has been eclipsed, surpassed, even bypassed, overwhelmed by the Lancang Mekong Corporation. In the last 3 years, the Lancang Mekong Corporation, the LMC, has made a lot of headway. And unlike the South China Sea, the main player in the Mekong mainland is China. I mean, South China Sea has everybody. Australia, Japan, India, even the Europeans, France and Britain, they all want to be part of the action in the South China Sea. But in the Mekong mainland, it's just China. And the nearest to it, not so much the US, but it's Japan. So I see the Japan-China rivalry as central and critical to the Mekong mainland, as opposed to the maritime domain, South China Sea, where I think the US has a much bigger stake, much more repertoire to draw on. So if you look at these two domains, I mean, the Mekong mainland for us is consequential because we live around here. China has shown that we will not play by the rules, and the Mekong rules are a bit inchoate, a bit tentative, not clear, and not proven. I know we have the Mekong River Commission, and I hate to say it, but we have this ASEAN-related body set up, and soon they become bureaucracies. And I don't have a strong fondness for bureaucracies. So all these bureaucrats, ASEAN, MRC, and so on, and they still want to be relevant, but in fact they're not. China has the LMC, and LMC is the only game in town down to the Mekong mainland, and the Mekong River Commission has been marginalized. And now we have to grapple with what that means for the region. So China has built these dams, and these dams, I'm going to conclude in just a minute. These dams, of course, have been built at will and has affected, downstream countries, and we'll hear more about this today. And Laos also has built dams, and Thailand has kind of benefited from the Lao dams, mostly, to the detriment of Cambodia and Vietnam. So the Mekong mainland is an exhibit area where China only plays by its own rules, and the rest of us have to follow. And we will see this in other areas, and that's how I see the Belt and Road rise. The BRI is a kind of China's global footprint, geostrategic campaign to return to greatness. But along the way, the key will be whether China will be willing to accommodate, to enmesh, accommodate, allow participation, inclusiveness by all the countries involved along the routes. And those routes, by the way, if you look at the map, around here, we're not part of the Belt and Road directly. We are part of these corridors. So mainland Southeast Asia, Pakistan, the Belt goes this way, the Maritime Silk Road goes this way. In between there is corridors. So also depends on how China is going to be inclusive or otherwise. If it's not sufficiently inclusive, then I think we will see a lot more pushback against China.
Thank you, Ajahn Sisnam. The 3 points, a very provocative hypothesis of the Belt and Road Initiative as manifest destiny. Ajahn Sisnam gave us a sense of the scale of BRI and raised questions about where finance will come from, as well as highlighted that there's been some pushback, even as it's been heavily promoted. And then finally highlighted how the rise of BRI has also started to challenge some of the existing legal international regimes. So now we will turn to Mr. Li Hong. Mr. Li Hong is currently the permanent representative of China to the United Nations Economic and Social Commission, Asia and Pacific. Before his diplomatic career, he had a technical background. He received a bachelor's degree in control engineering and a master's degree in informational science. After more than 10 years teaching and research in the university, he joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China in 2001, dealing with arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation issues. His postings have included the permanent mission of international organizations in...
Dear colleagues, dear friends, it's a great pleasure for me to be here. Hong Kong University is so popular and famous in Asia and beyond. So I feel very honored to have this opportunity to have a dialogue or exchange with our teachers, professors, and colleagues. As this year marks the 5th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative. And for the past 5 years, you can look back, great improvements or achievements have been made on the initiative. Domestically, the BRI has stimulated Chinese opening up and reform. The traditional opening up area is coastal area and in the eastern part in China. Now, through the BRI, we try to extend it to inland, to the western part. So this is the domestically effect. Externally, I think there are a lot of data which can demonstrate the achievements. Here I have some data on. In the past 5 years, the Chinese government, the volume of trade with the Belt and Road countries reaches $5 trillion. The volume of trade reached $5 trillion with the Belt and Road countries. And the annual growth rate of annual growth is 1.1%. So globally, the trade volume is decreasing, while on the Belt and Road, it's still increasing. So although the increasing is not so significant, but it's increasing compared with others, it's progressing. And also the Chinese overseas direct investment reaches $60 billion. And this investment created more than 200,000 jobs for the regional countries. Besides, there are 103 nations or international organizations signed 118 agreements with China on BRI. So all these agreements in China, all these agreements have special bureaucracy to follow up. So Chinese proposal, this proposal is really action-oriented. We are not just talking. With this data, I want to mention three or four points. The first point I would like to stress is BRI has contributed a lot to the global economic recovery. The BRI is proposed in 2013, which at that time the world economy is beset still with the financial crisis. So with this BRI initiative, I think they stimulated investment all over the world. And all the countries are trying to make use of this opportunity. That's why we have so many countries to join in our BRI summit last year, Beijing. And also so many countries in the international organizations trying to sign agreements with China to work together. So this is a great opportunity brought by China for the recovery. China's contribution to this initiative. In the past years, in the recent years, China's economic contribution itself to the global economy increase reaches 30%, more than 30%. The second point I would like to say is BRI responds to the global trends and the demands of the world. BRI has four components: policy dialogue and financial inclusion, trade facilitation, infrastructure, connectivity, and the number five, and the number five is people-to-people exchange. I think, as we have had just from Dr. Kitty, that infrastructure connectivity plays and trade facilitation plays one of the two most important parts and have the most investments. So globally speaking, all the countries need such infrastructure to get them out of poverty. In China, we say, if you want to get rich, to have a road to outside your village first, otherwise you cannot get rich. So China, according to our experience in the past 40 years, which we have such high economic growth, we think this infrastructure is important. But nowadays, under the global situation, not only infrastructure, we have to connect with each other. This is the connectivity. So not only infrastructure connectivity, we also need trade facilitation and to really help the countries on the roads to change their position on the global value chain. If we have capacity, the industry capacity cooperation with some underdeveloped countries, then they may join the process of globalization. So this is the second I would like to stress. The third point I would like to say is BRI is proposed by the Chinese government, but the general approach is market-based approach. All the investments are done through these enterprises, although there are a lot of state-owned enterprises, but they're still enterprises. Enterprises, they observe the rule-based approach, the market-based approach. So we have established no new rules for BRI. We observed existed widely recognized rules. And the Chinese government encouraged the enterprises to carefully observe the local rules and laws. We reminded of them for that. We reminded of them for the social responsibility. And they also need to take their risk, financial risk, social risk, political risk. They have to take the risk by themselves, not the government take over this risk. Number 4, I would like to say BRI made great contribution to global governance. Nowadays, the world is changing substantially, especially with this technology change, has wide impact for people's behavior, for people's communication, for countries' diplomacy, all have been substantially changed. We need new approach. China trying through this BRI, trying to propose something which might be help for the world to get out of these challenges, to address the challenges. So good. Under the BRI, we're talking about three major expenses. One is extensive consultation. The other is we should jointly build the initiatives or the proposals, not done by one country. The third is we should sharing the achievements, sharing the outcome, sharing the benefits, sharing. So these are the Chinese philosophy for the new problem we are facing in this world. So we are trying to use BRI to contribute something in this world. So these are the 4 points I would like to specifically stress out. As for recently, just 1 or 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, Chinese government have convened a symposium domestically on BRI for the 5th anniversary. The president of China, Xi Jinping, attended the summit and made a very important speech. The key elements he emphasized is how should we through BRI to deliver things which are badly demanded by the regional people up on this belt. This is the key message sent out. The second message sent out is we should not stop at talking. We should try to make it more substantial, tangible outcomes to deliver to these countries and peoples. So, with this symposium domestically, the first objective is, of course, to review the past lessons, experience, achievements. We also pay close attention to the international, no matter criticism, constructive suggestion, or kindly reminding, we pay close attention to that. Attach great importance to these different views, diverse views. We also believe we should not stop. We should not stop because of some countries have some resistance. This is normal. Whenever you do anything, there are resistance. No matter it's right or wrong, you will have your own judgment. You need to have the judgment from the people, not from the media or from some politicians. Yeah. So this shows the strong determination of China to promote the Belt and Road region. Besides, I would like to say, talking about the destiny, what China has been proposed is a destiny of shared future. We have a shared destiny in the globalization process, although we have resistance for globalization, but this is unchangeable, we strongly believe. So with this technology development, globalization will continue. This resistance is just a small turnover. We should not worry too much on that. We should handle it, but we should not do it. So we believe the destiny we must share. Otherwise, we will get ourselves lost. As for the Lantern Making Corporation, as mentioned by Dr. T.T. Lan, some of the countries like Cambodia, you know, perhaps they are not listed on the BRI. But actually, BRI is an open initiative. Any country, any initiative, if you are ready to communicate, to connect with the BRI, is open. So for example, we're talking about the 6 corridors proposed by BRI, and one of them is to Southeast Asia, through Thailand to Malaysia to Indonesia. And then if we are ready, we plan now Cambodia can connect it, make our connection with them. So this China-Laos Railway is one of the projects which can connect it to BRI. So we, again, I'd like just like to emphasize the openness of the initiative is very important. So nobody is excluded from the initiative. Yeah. I stop here. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Li Hong. So I think Mr. Li Hong gave us a sense of the momentum behind the BRI, including some of its achievements and some of the arguments that it's creating maybe a new global governance regime, building off the existing one. So next, we now turn to Mr. Benjamin Zawaki. He is a political and legal consultant in Bangkok, based in Bangkok, who works for the Asia Foundation and the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. He is the author of a recent book, Thailand, Shifting Ground Between the US and the Rise in China, which was published late last year. He was a visiting fellow at Harvard Law School from 2014 to 2015, and a term member on the Council on Foreign Relations through 2016. He has served as a policy advisor to President Jimmy Carter and 2 elders in Myanmar in 2013, and was Amnesty International Southeast Asia Research for 5 years through to 2012. He has also worked for other UN agencies and the International Commission of Jurists, and is a member of the New York State Bar. So, Benjamin, you have 12 minutes.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Chuck Carl. I also apologize to participants and fellow panelists that with about 5 minutes to go in the Q&A session, I need to rush off to the airport link. I apologize in advance for the abrupt departure. I think, first and foremost, what's interesting in considering the Belt and Road Initiative in Thailand is to think about the ways in which so many of the existing projects today have precedents going back in Thailand all the way to the Thaksin era at the beginning of the 21st century. For example, when you think about the Eastern Economic Corridor, the Southern Economic Corridor, even the Thailand 4.0 initiative, although these are Thai initiatives, they have been very recently put into the context of the Belt and Road Initiative itself. Right? Just last week, Deputy Prime Minister Somkit talked about increasing, doubling in fact, the value of trade and investment between Thailand and China by 2021. This harkens back in some ways to the free trade agreement between Thailand and China in 2003, when the very same Somkit was talking about doubling the value of Chinese investment in trade. When you look at the Utapao Airport, for example, pursuant to Belt and Road, China is interested in being a part of the construction of a second runway there and a 3rd terminal there. But of course, has had several airlines operating out of Utapao now since the start of the 21st century. And of course, this is of enormous strategic value and has strategic implications for the United States as well, given that Utapao has been part of the American geostrategic infrastructure since the Vietnam War. When you look at the high-speed rail initiatives, and there are too many of them in Thailand and far too complicated to go into in any depth today, they also have precedent in the early part of this century with various road and rail initiatives that China has either participated in, financed, or otherwise been interested in Thailand, connecting north to south as well as east to west. Of course, pursuant to BRI is the Langkong-Mekong Cooperation Mechanism of 2014, but prior to that, going back to the Thaksin era, you have the controversies that we continue to talk about today with respect to the dams being constructed by China, the dredging and the blasting of the riverbed, and indeed as late as 2011 with the commencement of joint security patrols on the Mekong River, including on the Thai side of the border. Last week, Deputy Prime Minister Som Kit talked about Thailand itself as being a potential gateway for the BRI in Southeast Asia. This is the same language he used when Thaksin himself dubbed him, quote, Mr. China, some 13, 14 years ago. Pursuant to BRI, we have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP, as well as Dr. Titinan mentioned, the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank. But again, in some ways, precedent for these institutions was set by the ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement in 2002, a full 16 years ago. And signifying perhaps a sort of new area, genuinely new area for China is its interest in Thailand's ports, namely the Lam Chabang port as well as the Sattahip port. There isn't much precedent for that, but of course Sattahip has enormous, not unlike Utapao, strategic implications for the United States. And the coup de grace for China will be if and when Thailand agrees to place its 1 to 3 submarines it will purchase from China at the Sattahip naval station. So I mentioned all of these initiatives in Thailand in an effort in some ways to contrast the situation of the United States in Thailand and in the region. Because in contrast to the credibility and continuity that what I've said thus far speaks about China, you have a United States that simply did not make good on Obama's pivot to the region, originally announced in 2009 and articulated in 2011. You have a United States whose Lower Mekong Initiative, also announced in 2009, has lacked a security element and has focused almost exclusively on environmental, ecological, infrastructural, and public health concerns. And you have a United States whose Trans-Pacific Partnership actually began under the Bush administration long before Obama, but did not result in an invitation to Thailand until 2012, a year before the Belt and Road Initiative was announced. And since the BRI was announced in 2013, Trump's response has been to replace the TPP with a trade war with China and replace Obama's pivot with the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. Economically, politically, and geopolitically, the replacement of the TPP with a trade war with China was the wrong move by the United States. Obviously, the trade war will affect the economies of both nations, the U.S. and China, but more importantly for Thailand and for the U.S.-Thai relationship, it will affect Thailand's economy as well as those of other countries in the region. And in a way, although I don't believe Trump intended this at the time, it may signal a kind of Achilles heel for the BRI in places like Thailand and elsewhere in the region. The reasoning goes like this. Given the heavy public relations aspect, and in fact heavy substantive aspect of the BRI on economic investment and on development, if local economies, Thailand's included, suffers as a result of this trade war between China and the United States, it might provide the countries in the region who are part and parcel of the BRI a reason, an excuse, even an impetus for backing out of some of the BRI's projects. In other words, the BRI depends on not only a healthy Chinese economy, but also healthy economies locally that are on the receiving end of some of these projects. And if those economies, China's and the regions, both suffer as a result of this trade war, there may be a rollback to the BRI, and it may affect Thailand's and other regional countries' perception of the reliability of the Belt and Road Initiative and of their own ability to satisfy the kind of debts they're finding themselves in. The U.S. has been, after years of being out in front, the U.S. has fallen behind both China and Japan in terms of both imports and exports to and from Thailand. This again could be, if not entirely reversed, then certainly affected by the trade war, depending on how it affects local economies in this region. Like my fellow panelists, I also have 3 basic points in terms of a takeaway on how the BRI could affect U.S.-Thailand relations moving forward. The first is to say that the pivot itself, Obama's pivot itself from 2009, 2011, was itself a belated response to the rise of China, going back to the late 1990s and certainly the early part of the 21st century. In some ways, the BRI allows the United States, and arguably forces upon the United States, a second belated opportunity to respond to China's expansion. I personally believe that the BRI, although it is heavily invested in with an economic component, is potentially as well a project in military force projection, eventual military force projection, under the rubric of economic and development expansion at the current time. The United States free and open Indo-Pacific strategy then is an opportunity to counter this initiative. And essentially, what's important to realize about Thailand is, with the BRI and with the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, neither of those two strategies has the luxury of not including Thailand. Right? So much was made in May of last year when General Prayut, the Prime Minister of Thailand, was excluded from the Beijing summit, the Beijing BRI summit in May of last year. To me, in some ways, that signaled far more inexpendability on Thailand's part than it was evidence of how critical and how central and how crucial Thailand is to the Belt Road Initiative. If you look at a map and you talk about the Indo-Pacific region, Thailand's peninsular section sits squarely in the middle between the two oceans that are part and parcel of the Indo-Pacific strategy, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Thailand is a mid-sized country of 67 million people, a middle-income country, and of course it is a bilateral treaty ally with the United States, multilaterally in 1954, bilaterally in 1962, and is also a major non-NATO ally of the United States. This fact makes it critical that it be part of the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, but it also makes it all the more alluring to China as a central part of its Belt and Road Initiative as well. In other words, Thailand is a geographical and therefore a geopolitical linchpin in both of these strategies, both the BRI and the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. What I think the BRI is forcing upon the United States is the opportunity and the necessity, the imperative of not only revisiting some of the policies that were pursuant to Obama's pivot, but updating those policies in 2018, 2019, in such a way that hopefully the United States is able to get out in front from being behind for so long in the region. Although I will say that a recent press release from the State Department, which, as all of you know, has been heavily incapacitated since Trump took power, is not very encouraging. On August 4th, the State Department put out a press release that talked about, quote, a strong whole-of-government U.S. commitment to both economic and security engagement and assistance in the Indo-Pacific region. So far, so good, but went on to say, quote, that the security assistance funding will cover projects in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Mongolia, Nepal, the Pacific Islands, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam, without naming Thailand specifically, despite going on to cite Southeast Asia and the Bay of Bengal. The second point I would make with respect to the U.S.-Thailand relationship and the BRI is the fact that Thailand will take up the ASEAN chair next year in 2019. This will afford Thailand the opportunity to shape the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy from a multilateral standpoint, just as it has an opportunity to do so at any time from a bilateral standpoint vis-a-vis the United States. In other words, there's a silver lining in the fact that the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy is still not terribly developed, not terribly well articulated as of yet. Thailand has the opportunity to help shape that strategy in such a way that it responds to its own interests. And as ASEAN chair next year, it has an opportunity to do so behind the cloak of multilateralism, behind the cloak of ASEAN. Secondly, it affords the opportunity for the United States and Thailand to work together at reinstating ASEAN centrality in the region. ASEAN was founded in 1967 as a bulwark, in some ways economic bulwark, against communist expansion emanating from China at the time. The world has moved on very much since 1967, but we do see China, for example, in the South China Sea, expressly wishing to deal with countries on a bilateral basis, employing a sort of tried and true divide and conquer approach to the various claims disputes in the South China Sea, The ASEAN chairmanship that Thailand will have next year gives an opportunity for Thailand in a very subtle, nuanced way to reinsert ASEAN centrality and ASEAN unity in the face of this approach. I believe that the Belt and Road Initiative cannot be disconnected from the South China Sea and indeed from China's approach to Taiwan, which I think is why we may see an increase in freedom of navigation patrols by the United States in the South China Sea. Again, something that when Thailand is chair of ASEAN, it may have a better opportunity to speak out in favor of behind that cloak of multilateralism. The third and final point I'll make, and I must say it really depends on the first and second points being realized, is that given that the BRI, I think, is giving rise to and has led to the development of the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, the BRI is allowing the United States and Thailand to have a much more constructive conversation about what are often referred to as U.S. foreign policy values in this region. Right? It affords an opportunity for the U.S. and Thailand to move beyond these sorts of stop staging coup d'etat and start holding elections kind of rhetoric that is frankly unhelpful to both sides. Should the U.S. become much more present and perhaps much more muscular in the region, it allows itself the opportunity to present an alternative to a values approach, an alternative to the Chinese approach. There's been talk about the debt trap. Did not mention the debt trap that certain countries participating in the Belt and Road Initiative are finding themselves in. But many of the BRI projects do not uphold, for example, labor rights or environmental concerns in the way that the United States, by law, is compelled to do when it invests in other countries. It's again another reason why the TPP, having fallen by the wayside as far as the United States is concerned, and been basically replaced by China's RCEP, is detrimental, I think, to democratic rights in the region, to accountability, to transparency. Should the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy involve an economic element, and even to the extent that it's a strictly security-based policy or strategy, it does allow the United States to present a different face as far as values is concerned to the region. Obama, I think, was strong on values, but unfortunately very Pollyannish on insisting on seeing China only as a cooperative partner, as opposed to potentially a competitor as well. And while the Trump administration, I think, is far more clear-eyed as seeing China as potentially a threat to the rules-based order, that same administration is, of course, ambivalent at best at adhering to those rules itself. One only needs to look at China in the region to see the extent to which China's ability to influence local governance and its ability to advance its interests are mutually reinforcing strategies. Right? We can't simply have an approach where we're either promoting our foreign policy values or on the other hand, promoting only our national security interests. Those things have to be seen not as mutually exclusive, but as mutually reinforcing approaches. And again, China has done a far better job in the region than the United States has, and perhaps the BRI will spur the United States to take a more sophisticated approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Benjamin. Benjamin highlighted the historical context of many of the projects and agreements that are becoming meshed within the BRI, and then also highlighted the centrality of Thailand both to the BRI and to the Free and Open Indo-Pacific strategy, and especially emphasized the potential role that Thailand will play in 2019, given that they will become the chair of ASEAN. And then finally also put forward the proposition that the US could in fact offer an alternative vision to the BRI, and in fact the BRI is an opportunity even to discuss this. Our final presenter is Mr. Amantha Pereira. He's a journalist and media development specialist based in Colombo, Sri Lanka. His work has appeared in Time, Reuters, Interpress News, and The Guardian, amongst others. His reporting concentrates on the coverage of climate change and its impact in Asia, Sri Lanka's post-conflict situation, humanitarian aid, human rights and trafficking, and urban development. He also works as a regional coordinator for the Asia Pacific and for the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma at Columbia University. His work has won various awards, including the 2013 Panos South Asia Climate Change Media Excellence Award and the 2016 Excellence in Environmental Reporting Award, awarded by the Society of Publishers in Asia. Amantha, you have 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I hope my presentation will add a somewhat complex dimension to the discussion that has been taking place. I'll concentrate on two things. One is the outspoken debt trap that Sri Lanka has become an example of. From Nepal to South Africa to Laos, wherever there is Chinese investment now, everybody asks, look at Sri Lanka. Look at Sri Lanka's example of the debt trap. That has been spoken about a lot and written about a lot. But I'll also try to concentrate on something that has not been looked into that much, which is the environmental or possible environmental impact of the Chinese engagement in Sri Lanka. The two pictures that are here are classic examples of China's engagement in Sri Lanka. The one on the top is the dredgers working in tandem in the project which is Sri Lanka's single largest foreign investment project, the $1 billion Colombo Port City project, which is reclaiming land just outside of the capital. The one on the bottom is the Southern Highway, but the Southern Highway during the 2017 floods, where the highway went underwater. In 2009, the three-decade civil conflict in Sri Lanka ended. And we had a government that was on a high, a government that thought that it could do whatever it wanted. And it was also a government that was looking for funds. And if you look at the Sri Lanka's falling debt, it takes a very steep rise since 2009. Because with the end of the Civil War, what we saw was a government that was looking for funds to be invested in Sri Lanka. And yes, there were countries which were traditional investors and funders of Sri Lanka, like India, US, Japan. But what they gave didn't match up to the government's expectations. And the source that matched the expectations was China. So here we had a government which was looking for money, and we also had a rich source which was willing to give money. So often you hear Sri Lanka being spoken about as the example for the debt trap. Now, the issue with the debt trap is primarily one of financial sense, because with Chinese investments, you have projects that are performing brilliantly, but within that same investment environment, you also have projects that are not performing at all, projects that are zero performance. Now, example for a project or an investment that is really performing is the expansion of the Colombo Harbor. The Colombo Harbor was expanded with Chinese funding, and the Sri Lankan government played its cards brilliantly. It made the first approach to New Delhi, knowing very well that New Delhi didn't have the funds, but it said, look, we're trying to expand the port, why don't you guys invest? Delhi looked at it and said, look, we don't have the funds. And then they said, okay, fine, we are going to give it to China. And China invested in it. Now, the port is performing really well, and the investment is Chinese, but the container traffic is Indian. So that is sound financial investment. But while it was doing all this type of investments, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, it was a government that was on a high. It was a government that has done something that nobody expected it to do. It ended a civil war that had lasted for 30 years. So it was a government that was thinking that it could do a lot of things. The image that you have at the bottom of this picture is the very famous world's emptiest airport. This is in the southern part of Sri Lanka. This was again constructed from scratch with Chinese funding, and as of this April, as of this June, not a single aircraft is now coming into this airport. So this is an airport which is non-functional. So there are a string of projects in the south of Sri Lanka, which coincidentally is the native area where the then Sri Lankan president originated from. So you have this airport, which is now a tourist exhibit. You can go, you can walk around, you can see how the airport functions without aircraft coming in. You have a port that is also not functioning up to potential. You have a cricket stadium that is now being lent for weddings. You have a convention center that is closed. You have 4-lane highways where only bicycles are seen. So there's a string of this type of projects that do not make sense. So that is the reason why Sri Lanka has been sucked into this debt trap. Now, because the economy didn't perform as expected since the end of the war, these kind of non-performing projects cannot be absorbed. And what that has forced the country to do is look for other alternatives. One of my fellow panelists said that within the Belt and Road Initiative, the countries that take these investments, they have to take over the risk. So simply that's what Sri Lanka has had to deal with.
No. You are wrong. I'm talking about both sides.
Yeah.
In the crisis, have to take.
Yeah. So Sri Lanka.
Not one way. Sorry.
So Sri Lanka has to have. Yes, Sri Lanka had to take the risk, and the risk didn't work out. So what they've had to do is that they have had to renegotiate the agreement. So because they couldn't match up the loan payments, they've had to now negotiate amendment to the port that lies very close to this airport, which is now controlled by China. So this is where the issue of the debt trap has arisen. The other part that I wanted to just mention is the environmental impact, which has not been dealt with. This is the southern part of Sri Lanka. This is pristine shrub jungle. This is basically elephant country in Sri Lanka. This is where most of large parts of the Chinese investment is taking place. As you can see that this is a solar power plant. It's just sprung up in an area which is shrub jungle. You don't even see villages in this area. So there is this kind of investment that is taking place, but there has not been a proper assessment of the environmental impact. We still don't have the details of the environmental assessment report connected with the Colombo Port project, the extension of the Southern Highway, the airport. The airport sits right in the middle of traditional elephant country. And even though there are no aircrafts coming in, there are wildlife rangers inside the airport chasing tuskers. There were wildlife rangers placed inside the airport to shoot and chase away peacocks. So we don't really know the impact because the details of the impact are not known, whereas the details of the debt, the funding, the repayment schemes are quite well known. So this is in the heart of the south part of Sri Lanka. A little bit further on to this, you will see the excavation that is going on with regards to the extension of the southern highway. What has been done is that an area that was probably one of the least populated in the country, that it's been taken up by the construction of the highway. Now you probably see excavation going on, and we do not know the impact. So that's one of the big issues when it comes to these kind of projects in Sri Lanka, because when these projects were started, so this the middle part is the highway that is going through, and it's cutting through the pristine jungles of the country. And as I said, at that point, the government that was in office was not quite willing to compromise its plans because of critical environmental reports. So it forced these kind of projects. Now there is more open discussion, there's more critical discussion about these projects. But we still don't know the extent of the impact. Because of time, I'll shift to the next slide, and I'll stop there. The image on our left is the entrance of the southern highway, which is completely flooded. This is last year when we had above average monsoon, and the entrance of the highway completely went underwater. Nobody knew that this could be possible. The fact that the monsoon has been fluctuating is quite well known, because in the last 5 to 10 years what we've seen is that rains are now being packaged into very short bursts, and Colombo goes underwater quite often, but this was not known. And nobody still knows the reason for this and whether this could repeat. Villagers and others in this area told journalists and others who went to report this that to take a close look at where the flooding was taking place. They were always saying, look, the water is on the eastern side of the highway. There is no scientific basis, there is no research that has been done, but the villagers were saying the highway is blocking the drainage, but we don't know whether that's the impact. The image on the right is an image that the Chinese company that is doing the land reclamation is very proud of. There are 4 dredgers working in tandem. This is just outside the capital of Sri Lanka, Colombo. They are reclaiming land. Again, there are serious issues about the impact, but we do not know the extent of the impact. Because the environmental impact of these investments haven't been dealt with, because given the kind of political, geopolitical drama that's involved, everything seems to be consumed by politics. Whenever there is even a rumor about Chinese investments in Sri Lanka, you have Delhi doing something. Right? When the Chinese president came to Sri Lanka in 2014, there was a Chinese sub that surfaced in the Colombo harbor. Delhi went berserk. They were asking, we don't know about this, what is this and all that. And the Sri Lankan president at the time assured New Delhi, look, next time this happens, we will make sure that you know in advance. Within less than a year, another Chinese sub appeared in the Sri Lankan harbor, and till it appeared, New Delhi said officially they didn't know about what was going on. So there was a government change that happened in Sri Lanka in 2015, and there is evidence to suggest that New Delhi backed the opposition. And part of that kind of involvement was because what they saw as China's growing influence in the region. So because of such political situations, the environmental impact has been sidelined. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the answer highlighted the risks associated with infrastructure projects that don't function, including debt, finance allocation, and also environmental impacts. I think these issues are not just an issue in Sri Lanka, but also have been raised in the context of Thailand recently. Also, I've seen in Laos in the context of the railway that's being constructed. And then Hemant also highlighted the geopolitics that are in play between two very large powers over Sri Lanka. So all of the speakers have largely kept to time within 20%, which means we have half an hour now for discussion. So I think before we invite them to comment on each other, which I think maybe some might like to, I think we'll have time for maybe 2 rounds of questions. So given that the speakers have been very disciplined and brief, could anybody who would like to ask a question or give a comment also be disciplined and brief and introduce yourself and the question and who you'd like to have it addressed, so I can see one already. We'll take a round of 3.
Sang Yi, China Dialogue. Thanks to everyone for such fascinating comments. I wanted to ask any of the speakers to maybe sort of bring their comments back around to the sort of overarching theme of the day's forum, which is the Lansang-Mekong Cooperation Framework, and maybe fit some of their comments within, or speak particularly to the implications of that framework for the sort of geopolitics. Clearly, Dr. Titinan talked about the ways in which that framework may have already eclipsed the Mekong River Commission. But the LMC arguably goes beyond water and environmental cooperation towards really displacing some of the kind of regional economic frameworks that exist, and arguably is analogous to some of the other, I think it was Benjamin Zawaki mentioned the sort of divide and rule type strategy that China plays in other regions as well, where, for example, it prefers to or has supplanted existing multilateral cooperation frameworks by, for example, working with the 16+1 group in Europe or working with China CELAC Forum in Latin America. So is there a way that this fits with an emerging kind of geopolitical or global governance strategy from China, and what does that mean?
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thanks. I'm Ellen Kelly from the UK Department for International Development. A couple of questions. One is about the, apologies if this was addressed earlier, I was in another meeting, so I came a bit late. One is about the debt issue, and I wanted to get a little bit more into the question of debt and to examine from the Sri Lankan cases, but perhaps also other cases, whether it's a question of the terms of the individual loans or the overall debt burden. So is the question, for instance, in the Hambantota port and the renegotiation of the terms, is that because of onerous terms for that particular loan or that particular line of credit, or is it about the overall debt burden on Sri Lanka and therefore a kind of obligation of the international community more broadly, or is it directly about China an individual loan issue? And the second question is about the environmental impacts, which I'm very glad that you raised. In the kind of cases that you mentioned, do we know whether impact assessments have been carried out and not shared, or is it just not known whether those impact assessments exist? And particularly for Mr. Lee Hong, how does this fit with the kind of greening Belt and Road initiative, and particularly some of the kind of guidelines on green credit and things that have been issued by CBD and Exim Bank and others?
Thank you. So is there a question?
My name is Jia I work for Stockholm Environment Institute. I'd like to ask Mr. Lee Hong, you mentioned about last week that there was some BRI summit convened, there's some discussion convened in China. And I just would like to learn, because you mentioned in that discussions, they actually have a lot of talk about lessons learned and the success from the BRI. So do you have any kind of concrete example for such discussion and recommendations, how upcoming projects that will be funded under Lanshan Mekong Corporation's Virtual Fund would actually take into considerations of any lesson learned that BRI's project has already experienced for the past 5 years? So any things that you have?
I can see one more question. Take this one and then we'll go back to Alice.
Thank you. My name's Katie Lynn. I'm from the Australian Embassy. Just a question about regional architecture. We've mentioned LMI, LOC, MRC, BRI, Free and Open Indo-Pacific. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is the role of ACMEX. So I'm interested in the panel's views on the role of ACMEX vis-a-vis these various bodies in the region. In particular, because we are in Thailand and Thailand has just held the ACMEX summit. So following on from that, my second question is really, how does the panel see the regional landscape unfolding, say in 10 or 15 years? For instance, do you see these Mekong issues being placed on the ASEAN agenda? Or do you see, a possible COC for the Mekong, say in 15 years? Is that a possibility? Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe we go to the panelists in the order that they presented.
I think most of the comments should be allotted most of it to Ms. Li Hong, I think. But I'll just touch on a couple of points. I think that somebody mentioned the LMC in a broader geostrategic canvas, right, on a broader canvas, beyond the Mekong space. How does it fit with the larger geoeconomic, geostrategic landscape or outlook for China? And then combined with that, I think the ACMEX, I'll just touch on this point. Look, the LMC been around a very short time, come a long way. Already 2 major summits, and I think it's fundamentally qualitatively different than the South China Sea, the Mekong mainland. I think in South China Sea, as I mentioned before, there are multiple players, a lot at stake, and also a significant, substantial chunk of global shipping goes through the South China Sea. It's a vital sea lane to a lot of countries. The Mekong is different. It's China's backyard, and so far we haven't seen any visible, conspicuous pushback in the Mekong space. Of course, Cambodia is beholden already to China, Laos, beholden to Thailand, accommodating. Vietnam is a country that is resisting, but very quietly. I think Vietnamese that I've talked to from think tank workshops and various discussions and so on are not happy at all with what's happening around the Mekong River, but they have not openly, publicly voiced their opposition. So this is a case where China has a much more latitude to do as it pleases. Hence, the LMC has made a lot of inroads. Going forward, I think the LMC is, unless there's pushback, I don't see the U.S. LMI or the latest Mike Pompeo's visit. 113 million that's a drop in the bucket in terms of size and scale. Japan is a key. If Japan, I notice every time we have a workshop about the LMC, China sponsored, and there are a number of them, and China is keen to sponsor these workshops. As soon as it happens, Japan will come around, and these think tanks in the region would say, would jump on it. So I think the LMC countries are keen to see more Japanese counterbalance. They want to see more, they want to hedge more, but they haven't had a choice. So if Japan steps up more, and Japan has been stepping up, then we could see that kind of rivalry competition in the Mekong mainland. In the broader sense, this is China's, this is a small constituent part of the Chinese geostrategic outlook. China is a huge country and with far-reaching global ambition. So I think LMC is just a small, not a dot, but maybe a corner of the Chinese overall geostrategic canvas. ACMEX is mainland Southeast Asia. Ayurvedi Japia Macroeconomic Cooperation Strategy is AC. Ayurvedi Japia Macro ACMECS. In fact, ACMEX harks back almost 2 decades. I don't put too much currency in it. I think it's a late revival for political expedient political gains by this current outgoing government ahead of the elections that it wants to win. ACMEX has to be, since you brought it up, it should be viewed in the context of the ACD, the Asia Cooperation Dialogue, and within the Asia Cooperation Dialogue in 2002-2003, this was Thailand's grand strategy at its peak to harness its geographical makeup, value, to become the heart, the center of gravity in the Asian landmass. So the Asia Cooperation Dialogue extends from the Korean Peninsula all the way to the Middle East. So the entire Asian landmass. ACMEX is the mainland Southeast Asia. So the idea back then was to leverage Thailand's what Thailand could bring to bear geographically, economically, its size of its market, and so on, as a hub of mainland Southeast Asia, and in turn mainland Southeast Asia as a hub of the Asian landmass. That became dormant for some years because of Thai domestic conflict and turmoil. I think this latest revival is not far-reaching, because I think that the leadership is not behind it. Some kid is behind it, because he was involved in the beginning, at the outset. So I don't think it has much of a leg. Now, if there's a different government that comes into power, the kind of government that's aligned with the government from 18 years ago, then I think it could be revived with some genuine intention.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, there are many questions for you.
Thank you. I just try. First of all, I have say a few words about geopolitics. Actually, myself, and now it's working on economic social issues. I don't like geopolitics. Geopolitics is something sometimes based on the presumption, based on the speculation. But economic social affairs is much more tangible. But I understand, as a country getting more economically powerful or comprehensively powerful, there must have some geopolitical impacts to the region. This is reality. And Chinese development and getting powerful is a good news to the world, to the regional countries, because we at least solved 1.3 million people starvation problem, and making these people staying at home providing them with happy life. This is one of the major objectives of the Chinese government, and also is good for the neighboring countries and for the world. As for the investment in this region, I think there are, I have a little different view with Dr. Kitty Lan. Actually, in the Lancang Mekong area, we have a lot of mechanisms, a lot of investments from the world. The first mechanism which has been run well is supported by Japan and the United States is GMS. GMS has huge investment to this region and made great impact, contribution to the development of Lancang Mekong. And now we have, of course, Lancang Mekong, this is the reality. And we have ACMEX, we have Lower Mekong Initiative from the United States also. Lower Mekong Initiative from the United States also have a lot of investment, and they have a lot of influence. So there are a lot of mechanisms in this region. I think this is good for the region. If no country, no other powers have investment in this region, that's bad news for the region. If there are more investment comes, we should welcome, and we should encourage them to have cooperative competition, which may benefit for the regional countries. So I think, at least from our Chinese point of view, all these mechanisms can be complementary to each other. They are existed, they have their own history, their own reasons, but they can all contribute to the development. This is good for the economy. We should not have zero-sum game. As for the debt issue, I will try to give you some data here. And actually, it's yesterday, Washington Post have a article on this debt trap. And the Philippines foreign minister answered this question instead of the Chinese colleagues. The Philippines says that their own debt, the total debt, only 1% comes from China. Most of them comes from the multilateral banks and the traditional Western countries. So 1% of the debt of Philippines is from China. Do you think this 1% could overturn the government, overturn the country? Okay, as for Sri Lanka, until in 2017, which you mentioned, it is a peak time for Sri Lanka's debt. 10% debt comes from China. 10% from China. And among them, 61.5% are preferential loan, which the interest rates is much lower than the other developed countries' loan. 61% are preferential loan. So this is you're talking about. The others, even Pakistan. Pakistan, everybody considers China is the biggest debt country of Pakistan. But actually, in Pakistan, for 40% of its long-term debt, 42% of its long-term debt comes from the multinational banks. 10% come from China. Okay. So, let alone Africa countries. In Africa, China is come go to there very late, only in the past few years. The debt compared with the total number, the overall of the debt is negligible. It's very small. So this is what we're talking about debt trap. And as for some of the specific issues, for example, you mentioned about the harbor in Sri Lanka. I think I mentioned about during the negotiation of the projects, it's done. It's supported by the government, but the negotiation is completely based on the market-based approach. The enterprises discussed this contract. And you mentioned about if you're talking about the role of the Sri Lankan government, you should ask your government. And actually, I have the chance to talk about this issue with His Excellency, your Minister of Finance, which is on the current government. He said all the projects are discussed through very strict financial assessment report, environment assessment report. But how this report is done, this is decided according to the rules and laws of Sri Lanka, rather than the laws of the United States or Japan or China. According to their local rules and regulations. So this is about this debt issue and also environment issue. And actually, the similar answer I could provide. I don't want to go so much on detail. Another issue, green development Also, yes, let me show you first for the green development. Now Chinese have 3 battles. The first one, domestically we have 3 battles. The first one is to make a financial resilience system to reduce the financial crisis, the risk of financial crisis. The second is combating the deteriorating environment, thus promoting for green development. And the third one, of course, is the poverty reduction, which we set for objective to get the least 30 million Chinese in poverty to out of poverty. So green development is one of the very important parts of Chinese policy. We have a lot of investment, #1 in the world, in this field. And it's also, we are serious in implementation of the Paris Agreement. Even before we joined the Paris Agreement, Chinese people are quite concerned about this agreement. They believe this may affect the Chinese development, and there's a lot of resistance from the academical or even industrial field. But later, we made the decision, we joined it, and we decided, even US, without US, we will continue to promote. So our investment in this climate change and green development is the largest now in the world. And this investment will extend gradually through our BRI, LMC to these regional countries. So this is also one of the messages I get from the last symposium which held in Beijing on the BRI. Quality development, green development, inclusive development. So these are the messages we get. We have the determination to do more on this field. We take note of this criticism, and we understand the challenge in this field. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll turn to Benjamin. I know he has to run.
No, thank you. I'll just respond to the initial question about the sort of the geopolitical centrality or implications of the Mekong. China has suffered from what it sometimes is referred to as the Malacca dilemma for decades, right? It's the more than 2/3 of global trade and oil and liquefied natural gas traverse the Straits of Malacca, and even higher percentages of what China consumes and produces. The problem for China is that the U.S.'s 7th Fleet, part of it's what's now called the Indo-Pacific Command, exercises or could exercise effective control over those straits, which are increasingly clogged anyway with more and more ships and larger and larger ships. So just geologically, the straits are becoming an issue for all the world's transshipments, but particularly for China. It depends very, very much, almost exclusively on those straits in getting its goods, its oil, and to a limited extent, its liquefied natural gas from the warm waters of the Andaman Sea, the Bay of Bengal, the Indian Ocean, through those straits and up into China, because China's southwest is landlocked, right? It does not have literal access to those warm waters. Where the Mekong comes in is, on the one hand, the Mekong River, of course, begins in China and empties into the Gulf of Thailand. And insofar as it does so, it doesn't help China in mitigating the problem of the Malacca Straits. But that's where the road and rail networks that are being constructed and have been being constructed in Thailand for so long come into play. If roads and rails can assist China in offloading commodities, goods, etc., on the Andaman Sea, on the Andaman coast, and they can assist in delivering those commodities across the narrow isthmus in Thailand to the Mekong River, then they can be shipped northward into Thailand and northward into China, thereby decreasing China's reliance on the Straits of Malacca. This is critical because, as I mentioned before, I see a connection between China's landlocked southwest, its vulnerability in its southwest, and its interest in the South China Sea and Taiwan in waters to the east. If there is a crisis, much less an armed conflict, involving the South China Sea and/or Taiwan, China could find itself vulnerable to the U.S. cutting off the Straits of Malacca, cutting off oil supplies, limiting the ability of China to ship soldiers and supplies and ships from west to east. And that's where I see the Mekong is potentially an alternative in providing the Chinese route of transportation. And credence is lent to this further by the enormous quantities of rubber and oil that have moved up the Mekong River for a decade or more. Of course, oil and rubber have obvious civilian uses, but they're also dual-use commodities in that they have a military application as well. The last thing I'll say before I run, simply on the question of ECMEX, and also Dr. Titinan mentioned the Asian Cooperation Dialogue, is simply to note that these were both Taksin initiatives. Right? These both are 15 plus years old, and they were initiatives of the Taksin administration. I'm neither sort of blaming or crediting Taksin for this, but I'm pointing out that they were, as long ago as 15 years, an invitation for China to sort of grow its footprint in Thailand, even at a time when the Americans were beginning to prosecute wars in the Middle East, from which it really has not fully extricated itself. I need to go, but again, I thank you all very much, and I apologize for my departure. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the two questions on Edwin and the environmental issues. Again, on the debt, the onus is with the Sri Lankans far more than with the Chinese who gave money. Because just because the people in the government change, the responsibility and the agreements that the 2009 to 2015 government signed is transferred to the current government. And these are just bad projects that are within a very vicious cycle. If you look at the Colombo port, it's performing, so it's fine. If you look at the highways, you can plan out for the future and say, okay, these will come online. There are people using this, there's money coming out of this, we can plan it out, okay, we can make money out of it. But look at the other vanity projects. There's an airport which is closed. There's a port that is not functioning to its optimum. There's a cricket stadium which you can't do anything with. There are convention centers. There are linking roads that do not perform. So you have these kind of, non-performing projects within your economy which hasn't taken off since the war, end of the war. You don't have new industries that have come up. You're still dependent on your domestic workers who are going overseas for your foreign exchange. You're still dependent on garment exports. And your currency is under tremendous pressure. The Sri Lankan currency, as other regional currencies, is at its lowest in history. So all this together has made that the current government has had to renegotiate terms. So that's where we are. And I think the lesson that could be taken is that you will look at the investments that you are doing and also phase them out. You expand a big harbor, then you just don't go and build another harbor 150 kilometers south. You have a performing airport and you do not just build a completely new airport 150 kilometers south. These are the lessons that you can take. On the issue of the environmental impact, because of legal clauses, the environmental assessment reports have been done. Are they public? No. Are they detailed? Again, we don't know. Do we know whether these projects can have a negative impact? Again, the jury is out. The example is what happened with the Southern Highway. There were lots of stories about this could happen, that could happen, this could happen. But then there were other experts who were saying, no, these projects are done properly, there is drainage, the wildlife has been looked after and all that. But then suddenly there's a flood. And then the highway, which is elevated, gets flooded. So again, there is less scrutiny, there is less details on the environmental impact, and which I think needs to be looked into far more deeply.
So I think with that, we'll have to close this panel. But this is setting up a very interesting day, I think. So please can you join me to thank the three panelists and everyone who's left. We have a coffee break for half an hour, and then please come back ready for the next session.